So today's webinar is we're going to focus upon the audit findings nobody sees coming and why organizations lose control of their regulatory position over time. So what is this? Well, we're going to talk about the time factor or the life cycle management factor of maintaining and governing a regulatory position. And so that is one thing. What happens over time with a regulatory position? Now, what is a regulatory position? There might be different perspectives and definitions of that term. In my world, the regulatory position is that you have control over time for a specific product or your company and the operations of the company on a certain market, and what regulations that you should, comply with on that specific market. That, in my opinion, is a regulatory position, and it keeps changing. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's get started. And again, feel free to interrupt any questions or if I'm rushing things. So why is this interesting and why is it tricky? So many organizations assume audits reveal problems. It's like, I do any due diligence will lift any problems to the surface, and the audit could be one, an internal audit or external audit. That's how it works, really. But in reality, the problem that is revealed has existed for years. And this is where the time factor comes in and the life cycle management of a regulatory position. So the original regulatory decision that was made way back might have been correct at that time, but then it wasn't governed properly. And it's so easy that this slips. And that you have what I call scope drifting or regulatory position drifting due to various deltas that occur over time. So the challenge is that a lot of organizations and regulatory teams that I've been talking to, after some time, they can no longer really explain why the decision was made, what information it was based upon, and whether this decision still is truly valid. It felt safe and secure a couple of years back, but today, during the audit, it starts to get questions. And that is not a very pleasant position to be in. So take a look at an example of what could happen. Now we're talking future 2027 also. But let's say that 3 years ago, the regulatory position was established. So you have the MDR applicable and the rationale for MDR and all the clauses and provisions within MDR for your specific product. So the position, your product, the European Union markets, and EEA countries as well. That's the position. And from the position, you realize that MDR should be applicable. No-brainer if you're in medical devices or... So that was established. So 2024, a new market was added. In 2025, the product was updated. In 2026, the regulation was amended. In 2027, the original regulatory affairs manager left the company. And this is a very simplified thread of events that occurs over time. There's so many more factors coming in that makes your regulatory position starts drifting. The regulatory position is still active. The original rationale, it's kind of missing out. The assumption was unknown and decision makers gone, and scope never reassessed. So the regulatory position remains, but the rationale is invalid or not up to date because of the changes to the product and to the regulation per se. There might be new provisions or clauses within the regulation that should be noted as applicable. Hence, that is missing, and the rationale for that. And the rationale, the original rationale, was not updated since 2023. Which leads us to the fact that when the auditor questions a regulatory decision, organizations often discover that the position still exists, but the original reason cannot be reconstructed. All right? I hope you agree with me. And this is a little bit tricky, or maybe it's not, but there's so many factors and things that happens over time. And if you drill down to the root cause of why your regulatory position starts drifting a little bit, or that you cannot defend the current version of the position, has to do with tools that you use for this. What I often see is that I see spreadsheets of regulatory or regulations registers, often mashed up with guidances, notified body position papers, and standards, all in one. And sometimes even for more than one product. And this is where it starts to get blurry. Who's responsible for each row in that Excel spreadsheet? Is it one person or several persons? Is it for one product, several products? Is it for one market or several markets? And when you have a starting position like that, you ask for trouble because it's really hard to maintain. A spreadsheet, well, it has its version control if it's an online version so that you can roll back. But you all know what that's like. You go like, I don't recall really if this was April 2025 that we made a change. I have to go through all of them, which might take days to prepare so that you feel confident. And when you find that version from 2025, you realize that there is no note taken why the change was made or if the change was made. And then you have to roll back again to 2024 and check the version that was there. And then you have to probably print both of them to really see if there is a change. And that Excel spreadsheet might have 200 rows, 500 rows. I've seen Frankenstein's monster spreadsheets with all this data that is supposed to be maintained over time. And it doesn't work. Well, it works, but it's like, I don't know, taking a tool that is certainly not intended for the use that you have. Trying to use the drilling machine as a hammer, which I do all the time. Because it's easy. And it's not that I'm trying to use the drill like a hammer. I turn it around, of course. And you shouldn't do that because it might damage the battery. Okay. Just a quick survey. Do you recognize yourself? I mean, this might be a little bit sensible, but we're transparent and open here. Give me a thumbs up if you recognize yourself. You can do that by the emoji icon in the middle of the lower bottom of the screen. I think I can try it out. Yeah, here's a thumbs up. Whoa, that was a thumbs up explosion. Fantastic. So we all recognize ourselves. We're using not so great tools to do this, and that's when it starts to happen. But let's take another perspective on this. So there are three questions auditors eventually ask, or they ask them. Why is this regulation not applicable? What evidence not or why is this regulation applicable or not applicable? What evidence supports the conclusion? And how do you know the conclusion is still valid? That's what they were going to ask. And that's what you should ask yourself. And ask yourself also as the person responsible for governing this. Do we maintain this in a proper and sufficient way so that we can feel calm. We can talk for hours about the threads of problems that starts to happen when you have regulatory position drifting. You have obviously incorrect data in a storage, in a repository, your spreadsheet of very important data. Because the MDR and the clauses or the provisions, if you like, of MDR that you should comply with, it's not only a compliant thing, it's information that should be distributed out through the organization, making sure that operations and the production and distribution of the product and the testing of the product follows the parts of that regulation that you should comply with. And if the rationale has drifted due to changes in the external world, which is the issuer of the regulation per se, or due to redesign of the product, it doesn't play along any longer. The data set that you have in your repository is false positive or incorrect, to make it simple, right? So these are the stuff that they're going to ask, and most organizations can answer the first question, and many struggle with the second, but very few have a systematic answer to the third. And that's the question you should ask yourself when it comes to your governance of your regulatory position. Okay? So what we will cover today is why regulation position becomes difficult to defend, regulatory position drifting, how regulations position evolve over time, common governance failure behind audit findings, and why regulatory updates require reassessment, and what continuous regulatory governance looks like in practice. And as a system provider, of course, we cannot miss out the opportunity to showcase how we handle this in the compliance studio. This is not a sales call really, and of course we do marketing of our products. But in reality, what I wanted to share with you is that there are so easy ways to solve this rather annoying problem at pretty much no cost at all, which will free up time and make you sleep better at night. Sorry, I sounded like a salesperson there. That was not the intention. So continuous awareness is becoming an operational expectation. Why? Because regulatory change assessment is increasingly becoming a continuous operational obligation. If you look into MDR Article 10.9 and IVDR 10.9 as well, ISO 13485 lifecycle obligations, post-market surveillance responsibilities, state-of-the-art expectations, and probably these two are the most important: notified body scrutiny and FDA quality system expectations. From what I hear and what I see, that notified bodies, when they see a spreadsheet that is not up to date and there's a mishmash of regulations, guidances, and standards, and there is no relation between them, provisions in the second spreadsheet, not up to date, rationals, well, you can't defend the decision, you can't tell when it was made, and so forth. You're asking for a problem, and it doesn't have to be that way, not at all. So what I would like to do is to go into how AI can help you with this. So AI, if we just think about it, what is it? It's a large language model with a reasoning intelligence on top of it. Large language model. So that means that AI loves to read text. And with the reasoning intelligence on top of it, it loves to interpret things related to that text. So AI as a tool is perfect for what we're talking about here. But There is a problem with AI. It's the screwdriver that we're trying to use to, for the needle in the wall. You shouldn't do that because things will break. So generic AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, etc. What happens is that you have disconnected prompts. And what do I mean with that? Well, you prompt the AI with an incomplete query or a context, which makes the AI unsure of what you're talking about. So you get isolated outputs. You have no maintained context. So, and you probably experienced this when you used AI, generic AI, that it starts to drift. It can't keep context because it wants to help with everything. But what you need is to reassess a rationale for a clause or for an entire regulation or guidance or standard in your register. And that's a lot of information that needs to be provided for the AI to stay in context and use its fantastic reasoning model on top of that context and all the information that's behind, which is the regulation per se. MDR, I think it's 508 pages. I don't know how many letters, but many. It reads that in a snap of a second. And it can reason about that if it has a clear data set to work with that provides really, really good output for you. Not the answer maybe, but it works like a second opinion manager that can make you finalize the reasoning to keep it maintained. And the last problem with generic AI is, of course, that you have a long chat that intends to solve a question you have, and you run into difficulty with the traceability, because then you don't really know, should I export this entire chat? No, that's weird. I need to compile some kind of summary regarding to this reasoning, but then again the AI provided a half a novel since it's like to provide long text, and you go like, okay, we can't use this as a rationale. It's like a 3 pages rationale while we have a clause applicable in our register. You should have something like 2 to 3 sentences, and then you have to call on the AI again and say, hey, I need this in 2 to 3 sentences, and it lost context. About what? The summary or everything else we talked about, and so forth. And you get really annoyed and pissed and you skip it. And think that AI is no sufficient for this purpose. And you're right, it's not. Generic AI is not. But vertical AI is something else. Vertical AI is when you put the AI, the LLM, and the reasoning model in a very narrow vertical. And you pull the leashes on the AI so that it can only reason about a given data set. And it can only behave in a programmatic way that was created by the one that designed the tool. And it can only stay in scope regarding that specific vertical, which means that it can maintain a regulatory context. It can only do applicability reasoning. It can link the scope. It can do reassessment continuously, and it can help you keep a governance structure. But that's when you take this fantastic AI engine, generic engine, and put that in a vehicle with an intended use. The intended use of ChatGPT or Gemini, Claude, and so forth, it is not to help regulatory affairs within life sciences. I don't even know what the intended use is for those generic AI models. In my opinion, I would say that the intended use or intended purpose of generic AI is to be placed in verticals where it really shines and makes its job really good. And well, another intended purpose with the generic AI is probably to help you with day-to-day questions in your personal life. But for professional purposes, I would stay away. When we're talking about processes like this and workflows like this, it's not sufficient. It could actually be dangerous. Worst case, you might end up with hallucinations from the AI, which is not really a hallucination. It just really wants to provide an answer to you. But since the chat has been all over the place and you try to keep it in context, all of that history in the chat is taken into consideration when it does the reasoning. And that's when you experience a reply as a hallucination. But it is not. It is reasoning on top of a dialogue that lost context. Right? So, and it's not weird at all. Actually, we human beings, we behave in the same way. If we don't really recall the context of a dialogue that was picked up days later or something like that, we might, I bet this has happened in your home when your wife or your husband asked you a question about the dialogue that happened a couple of weeks back, and you reply with something completely different. And they go like, have you lost it? It was just your brain's synapses that mismatched the question with another dialogue or parts of that dialogue that you preferred to remember or your brain preferred to remember. The reasoning model in AI with the neural memory system and reasoning system works exactly as our brains. Very good. Okay, so let's have a look at how you can solve this. And this will be showcasing the Compliance Studio. If you don't want to use the Compliance Studio, it's free to use. You can put up a regulatory position, one product on one market completely for free. So you can start using it already today. Or you can simply learn from what we showed today and try to apply that on your current environment, the spreadsheets and so on. There are things to learn in this from this tool showcase as well. So again, my intention is really not try to sell you anything, because that would just be boring. We do that in other ways. So I'm just gonna move up my prepared screen here so that you can see it. Yep, that should do it. Okay, so the Compliance Studio is actually all about maintaining and governing a regulatory position over time and make you sleep better. So I will start building a regulatory position, and it's very simple. You just add a product or a company, depending on the context need you have now. You can have several positions for either several companies or several products. And you're the one who knows best how to slice and dice this. It might be so that you prefer to have a regulatory position upon a part of a product portfolio, several SKUs that are similar, because that's how you would present things in an audit, and you might slice and dice your company's operations because that's how you prefer to present it during an audit or internally. It's completely up to you, and both way works. So let's just go ahead and do Omnipod Go, and that's by select corporation, and it's medical device. So now I create my profile. So I have a product, and remember, a regulatory position is the combination of a product on the market. So let's add a market. I can choose any market. I can go for the entire European Union. I could go for local markets. I can select, let's do China. Okay. Now, in order to establish the framework for this product on China, on the Chinese market, we need to we need to add some more information regarding this product. So we're going to add attributes. And again, remember what I said regarding generic and vertical AI. This is a vertical AI where we're building up a context. Oh, I have to move myself. I can be here. We're building up a context for the studio agent. That's our conciliator that's going to help us to maintain and govern a regulatory position over time. But first we need a starting position. So I'm going to use the AI assistant here. So what happens now is the studio agent go out and look for information regarding the product Omnipod Go. Couldn't find much for this, but I know it's a legacy product, and I'm going to do this really quickly to save us some time. And you should know this. It gets trickier when you come to the product, to company context, because there's a lot about your operations, and there's more questions when it comes to company context, such as if you disposal anything in water, emissions, and so on. And sometimes you might not have the answer. Same thing with the product. You might not know for sure. Then leave it blank and go back and update your profile, because that will again feed in the studio agent. The studio agent will realize, hey, there's actually other regulation that you should have in your register. Okay, it's intended for consumer use. Has nothing to do with. It's yep. And if you're uncertain about anything here, you can always check the info, which kind of explains why is this metadata important for defining a regulatory position, so to help you put yourself in context for why you're filling out this information. But this is very important to have to create this magic context for vertical AI. I'm gonna add some additional here just to make you see the example. So that's it. So now we have a product profile completed with product attributes that would be kind of denominators and very helpful information for the studio agent. So what the studio agent knows about the product is all the information available online on validated sources. If the product is not on the market yet, it wouldn't know, and it would say, but there's nothing available. I'll only use the information that was added in here to determine a regulatory position. So the next step would now be to establish this, and we found for China 9 applicable regulations, 4 non-applicable, and 3 for further review. So if we would have done European Union, it would have been much more or a higher number of regulations. But China and Asia in general works a little bit different, as you probably know. They have huge regulations, and provision comes in more of importance when you look at these applicable regulations. So just to speed things up, what you should do here is, of course, that you should check each and every one of them, because they are all added to your register. You could dismiss, add, or adjust an ad. And maybe you feel uncertain about this. You can always then discuss if you're not happy with the rationale, or if you see something that you're uncertain about. The good thing here now is that I click discuss this regulation. The studio agent pulls up a dialog here where it knows that we're talking about this product, we're talking regarding China, and we're talking about this specific regulation. And I can either use the pre-prompt or just start typing my question in here to make use of the reasoning to help you determine the perfect rationale. All right. So I'm going to close that, and just for speeding up things now, I'm just going to add all of them. And as you see here in the middle, we're building up our list of applicable of a regulations register for China. I do the same thing here. Now this is interesting. We have further review required. And the way we programmed this specific AI is that whenever it has less than 90% confidence in the decision or suggestion whether a regulation should be applicable or not, it gets in the phase or in the status of further review required. The AI has a fairly good data set regarding your product, but for some markets, and that's a generic data set, but for some markets, other information might be required to determine whether the product should be applicable or the regulation should be applicable or not. So we would like to discuss this to come up with the rationale. Oh, sorry. And sometimes the studio agent recalls like this, I can't help you with that. And that's, remember that I said that we have things in this very tight leash, and that might happen just because it's really prohibited to start drifting. And if it's uncertain about the context of your question, it replies with that. And then you have to help it out and say, explain, okay, here we are. So, given we do not have evidence in the entry that the device category has been captured by SEMR, spot check coverage, it can not be defensibly stated as applicable on the current facts. And then you have to start thinking, okay, so what do you need to know beyond the current information you have? Okay, I typed there. And it reads this regulation and starts to digest what parts and what kind of information that you should provide. So if you answer these two questions, is Omnipod Go or any component sold as a product in China included SAMR spot check category 3? Yes. Okay. Again, it will never reply anything based upon too little information, which is a security and quality check. So I need to reply much clearer what we need here. And why is that? Because at the end of this dialogue, the rationale for applicable and non-applicable has to be defendable. And the studio agent knows that. So it would never get sloppy and provide you with something that hasn't been thoroughly thought through and that you should feel that you can rely upon. But we'll leave that for now. I think you get the idea. Now, I'll leave them as is. So what we have now is our regulations register. And as I said, we need to identify the provisions in order to deal with these rather broad regulations. I think Japan is even worse, and South Korea, where you might end up with just 3 or 4 regulations that are very, very broad. So in this case, 9 provisions were found, and they are pending and they are proposed. But I'm happy with that, so I apply all of them just to speed things up during this webinar. And now we have cybersecurity law in China, and we have the provisions that is applicable for us. And we have rationals. Those are generated automatically. So we're happy with that. Now, finally, what I emphasized in the beginning, and as you probably remember, is when the regulatory position starts to drift. So let's fast forward and say that we did this a year ago, and we saw that there has been updates. So we need to discuss this. This was a long time ago. Sorry. But let's say we did this way back. Now we need to understand whether or not this has an impact. Good. This one says it doesn't, and it gives me good reasoning why. And if I want, you can propose tightened replacement rationale for the affected entries once you confirm whether your register stores the citation only or also stores the citation string. So it's very, very detailed. Let's check all of the updates. Okay, we haven't gathered that many yet. So that was actually the most recent one. Here's one as well. But I think you get the idea. So now we have for China, I can add additional markets. Let's do European Union. And since it's already have, sorry. Whoa, oops. Always 3 sneezes. Since it already have the data set required to determine the regulatory position, it can generate that immediately because we added that in the beginning. If I would like to check the product context, I have it here, right? So now we have 2 positions. We have EU, all the pending ones. I'll just add them. Yeah, we can leave that. I have the updates here. This is the last one. Works the same way. I would like to discuss this, whether it has impact or not. No changes. Good for us. Let's close that. And finally, drifting over time. So one thing that I would like to show you is that I must create versions. So let's say that this is the first one we do, version 1.0. Of course, I should add better notes here, what has happened. I don't have to remember and recall everything that I changed or added. I just create this. And then I'll go for MDR and identify the provisions. And I'm gonna add them all just to showcase how this works. Oh, it's a lot to read and a lot to reason about. It's reading MDR again. It likes MDR. It's a very interesting read. And while it's working, I'm gonna sip some water to keep my voice. This was a tough one. Yeah, we could leave this for now. What we can do is that we have further records that needs to be assessed, which would be then all the non-applicable. So let's add all of them. And then we have 7 further required, but we'll skip them now. Now the provisions are here, 46 provisions. I can add all of them as well. Okay. close that. Meanwhile, it's working. And you see it counts down here. Now it's still 16 provisions. We have 30 provisions, but there are 16 pending. And those are the ones that are not applicable, and also the ones that would be further review required, which is 11 here. But we'll leave them for now, because what I wanted to show you is that I create a new version here, which will be 1.1. And this is really interesting because remember the drifting question issues we had, whether things would be applicable or not. So I have my 1.1 version here, and I have my new 1.0, my initial and the latest here. If I check this, I have everything, all the changes stored in this. What changed? Well, we added MDR provision article 56 certificates as applicable, and because we require notified body involvement for medium risk device conformity assessment. So that was exactly what happened. 42 minutes and 7 seconds past 9 Central European time. So when combining programmatic and vertical AI with a sufficient environment, our belief is that you would do the right thing. And you could probably build up a spreadsheet with a lot of bells and whistles to probably do the same thing. Besides that, this one works on behalf of you to make sure that all the updates are monitored and brought to you, and that you have the reasoning model. With the spreadsheet, you have to pull data out, use an AI if you do, or have meetings to discuss the rationale. You should still do that, but you can do this on beforehand and then show it for your team and have a further discussion, which we think makes life way more easier. Time is flying. I should have stopped here by now and listen in on questions. Do we have any questions? There is one in the chat, I guess. No? Feel free to toss in some questions. I'm going to go back to the presentation as well. And stay at this slide. Why this is important. It's for audits and it's for your operations and a little bit, I would say, to make sure that regulatory affairs is always seen as a team that is constantly in control and know what they're doing. I know that there's a lot of stress going on, and just putting this aside could probably help a lot. Any questions? Feel free to type in the chat or unmute yourself. Either way. Okay, no questions, and time is up. We're gonna thank you. We're gonna continue running these webinars on various themes. And if you have a theme or a question regarding regulatory position or other similar topics, feel free to send in an email and request a theme for a mini webinar where we drill down on a specific question and just try to crunch that. Just feel free to let us know, and we'll address that over time. Also, I hope you take the opportunity to give the Compliance Studio a test. It is completely free. We'd love to get your feedback on what you see. There were some new cool features coming up soon. As you saw, it covers only regulations right now and provisions, which is a big thing. But we will also cover guidances, notified body position papers, or similar on other markets, and standards. But actually, the next feature coming up is something called the Compliance Outlook. because updates is super important to make sure that you govern your regulatory position over time. But then there are orbiting information, adjacent informations like draft and consultations, case law, and so forth, that could be equally important to you to have a good idea about your future horizon and regulatory position. So right now, it's like a balance sheet. This is it, and this is what it looks like today, and it's in control. But how about the future? What is moving in the next horizon? And that's coming up soon, and something we're working on at the moment. So a lot of cool things coming up, and hopefully the backbone and the most important thing is in place already. With that said, and there seems to be no further questions, and thank you so much for the thumbs ups and the heart. It really helps me recover from this cold, so that I get healthy and fresh for Midsummer's Eve, which is the big thing here in Sweden. It's probably bigger than Christmas. Crazy weekend. And with that said, I wish you all a lovely week and hope to hear from you. You're all welcome, and just send in an email or reach out to us. Your feedback and your suggestions on change and innovation is what drives us. So thank you so much, and take good care. Bye.